We are joined right now to discuss the most important story of the day by a young woman who is basically my de facto co-host whenever I fill in for Ben, because the area that she writes about always seems to be in the news when I fill in. That would be Madeleine Kearns, the William F. Buckley staff writer in political journalism at the National Review Institute. Maddie, thank you for coming on to discuss this crazy Supreme Court decision.
Thanks for having me again.
By the way, Maddie, I have to notice, last time you were on, you were the William F. Buckley Jr. Fellow at the National Review Institute. Now you are the William F. Buckley Jr. staff writer. Is that a promotion?
Actually, I'm just a staff writer, and yeah, it is a promotion. I've moved over from the National Review Institute to National Review, so.
Well, that's good, because Maddie, as you get that promotion, we are going to have to give a demotion to whichever producer gave me the wrong bio here that misstated your position. But in any case, congratulations. I really want to get into this, because the last time you were on, we talked about what signals we were getting from the Supreme Court about these major cases that would radically redefine the Civil Rights Act, specifically Title VII, that gave protections because of sex to protections based on sexual identity or sexual preferences, that basically would redefine sex into nothingness, as we've seen in the transgender movement. What happened today?
Yeah, so the court decided 6-3 with Gorsuch and Roberts siding with the Liberals to basically redefine sex. They made a decision that the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII of that, that's the employment discrimination law, did in fact mean, when it said that you couldn't discriminate on the basis of sex, it did mean transgender status and sexual orientation as well, which is obviously unprecedented and will have large sweeping effects. So it's a bit of a blow to those of us who have been on this issue and covering this issue. But one of the surprising things about it, though, is that it's sort of activism in originalist clothing. So Gorsuch has claimed that this is the textualist understanding, which is, in Samuel Alito's words, is preposterous. In fact, he said it was the most brazen abuse of our authority that he could think of. So it's pretty strong stuff from the dissent.
So Gorsuch, let's not forget, replaced Antonin Scalia, who's probably the most prominent popularizer of originalism and textualism in modern American history. This idea that you should interpret the Constitution, you should interpret laws based on what they meant, ordinary public meaning at the time that they were ratified. And so it's interesting here that Gorsuch is making the argument that at the time of the Civil Rights Act, it was understood that this would protect people on the basis of transgender identity, which at the time didn't even exist as we know it today. I mean, can you help me make sense of that?
Yeah, it is preposterous, but I think the argument that it was close at all from the textual standpoint would be that you don't normally spend too much time looking at the subjective intentions of legislators. You look at what was actually written. But even when you do that, I think it's very safe to rule out that people meant transgender status, because that sort of terminology did not appear till several decades later.
Right.
So an example of this would be, if you look at the Constitution as written, the term domestic violence referred to rebellions, but now we would associate that with obviously spousal abuse. And so you do have to consider the meaning insofar as what did the word actually mean at the time. And I think it is safe to assume that nobody was thinking of gender identity, which really nobody would have known what that meant in 1964. And so it really is it's an activist interpretation that Gorsuch has gone with, but he is claiming that he's working with the text, which is obviously just not tenable.
Hypocrisy is the tribute vice pays to virtue, I guess. And that's what we're seeing here with Gorsuch pretending to be a textualist when, in fact, he's passed this very activist decision. One thing on the meaning of this word sex, I noticed in Sam Alito's excellent dissent, he includes something like 9 pages of definitions of the word sex from the time of this passage. And there's no question that sex did not mean what people are saying that it meant. I wonder, though, I want to give Gorsuch a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I think the decision was preposterous. I think it was awful. I think he's dead wrong. But there is maybe a little silver lining here, which it ties into an argument that you've seen some conservatives make, most notably Christopher Caldwell in his new book, Age of Entitlement, which is basically that the Civil Rights Act, which was passed, certainly for noble purposes and to help real problems that people wanted to fix, but that the act itself was much, much more radical than people realized. And this is one thing I see in Gorsuch's opinion here, is he keeps saying, regardless of what the people who wrote this intended to accomplish, this is the effect, that basically Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is so broad, it takes over so much power from what you might have called the original constitutional order, that we need to follow that to its logical conclusions, and at this point, I guess, fundamentally redefine sex. Do you think there's anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think he's right in the sense that, they've been trying to do this through Congress, like, multiple times. They've tried to basically get the result that they've got today from the Supreme Court. I think I would just reiterate, though, that the argument that this is about discrimination on the basis of sex doesn't really stand by his own logic. Because, for instance, he's saying that it is necessarily about sex when you discriminate on someone with regards to their transgender status or sexual orientation. But if you imagine that a shop or something had a blanket policy statement, we do not hire LGBT people, people need not apply, they wouldn't even necessarily know the biological sex of those people that they're excluding. And so I think even by his own logic, his argument doesn't stand. He is right, of course, that the fact that this is going to have cause social upheaval is not really the primary concern of the court. But I still think that it is legislating from the bench. And I do think that the people who you see coming out in support of it are doing so because they agree with the policy outcome. They don't necessarily actually care very much about the fact that this is legislating from the bench.
Right, because as you point out here, Gorsuch's argument rests on this idea that, sure, sex is different than sexual orientation or sexual identity or transgenderism or whatever, but those concepts necessarily involve sex, meaning if I'm a man attracted to other men, then my attraction to other men does have some relation to my sex itself. And in Alito's dissent, he kind of rips this apart and says, look, you could have a rule that discriminates, say, against homosexuals or people who identify as the sex that they are not, that would work across the board, that would have no reference to their own sex. Now, the main arguments I'm seeing here on Twitter and in the commentariat today actually have nothing to do with the legal argument or the constitutional argument. They go something like this. Hey, you awful, terrible conservative, why are you so intent on discriminating against gay people and transgender people? Why are you so bigoted? Why do you care about this? Just let it go, you hateful, awful person. What do you say in response to that argument?
Well, first of all, it's not coming from a place of hate. It's coming from a place of concern, primarily for the sex-based rights and protections of women, which is what the whole on the basis of sex thing was meant to do in the first place, was to protect women. And you're now, I think there was a piece by John Birch, National Review, a while ago, in April actually, making the case that, look, if the Supreme Court decides with the employees here, which they have done, we really could end up in a situation where no employer and eventually no government institution can even acknowledge sex differences. And that means locker rooms, that means showers, facility restrooms, dress codes. It means the whole lot. And that could set precedent for women's sports teams. This is really going to be very, very disruptive. And the people who are going to pay the biggest price for this are women.
Right. J.K. Rowling, actually, on another continent, in another world, made this point just a week or so ago. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, said, look, I like trans people. I have nothing against trans people, but women are women. And, I don't think that men should get to define what it is to be a woman. And I think women should have their own spaces and be able to do things that they want to do. And she was pilloried for saying this, notably by men, by male commentators. One who wrote, J.K. Rowling is still talking, as if to say, shut up, lady, let me define what a woman is. And even by her own actor, Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter. He said, trans women are women, meaning to say men are women. There was a man, therefore, chastising a woman for saying that men are not women. We've gone through the looking glass here. How come ladies don't seem to get very much care in this discussion?
Well, it's because, what being a lady is just being whatever the trans actress decides it means. So, I mean, the Daniel Radcliffe thing was just preposterous because obviously he's not actually a very good actor, and so he owes his entire career to this woman, and he just throws her under the bus because it's the easy thing to do. Yeah, I mean, she was absolutely right in what she said, and she'd obviously been following the debate for 2 years and just really, really closely, and she has a number of charitable institutions in Scotland, actually, where she lived for years, which she makes the case that actually the relevance of sex when you're doing medical research or safeguarding or working with children is obviously pretty important, worth thinking about. And yeah, you just have the woke mob just coming after her. But I say good on her for saying what she said anyway.
I like that she's stuck by it, and I'm by no means a feminist, and I probably disagree with her on a great many things. But on this issue, she seems to make a lot of sense, and I think, political coalitions are kind of odd things. Politics makes strange bedfellows, and you're probably going to see that in the wake of this decision. I've got to ask you on an unrelated topic, Maddie. This came up the other day, and I felt only you could offer me some expertise on this. For those of you out there who are not familiar with accents, you might think that Maddie is from the Bronx or from Chicago, but actually she is from Scotland. And I saw this headline that amid all the statue toppling and the riots and the graffiti, a group of rioters has vandalized a statue of the great Scottish King Robert the Bruce and tagged it with the letters BLM and said racist king. Now, I don't know very much about 14th century Scottish kings, but Maddie, could you clear that up? Could you maybe defend Robert the Bruce and tell me why this is going on?
Well, I think the problem is that nobody seems to when the whole the attacking statues thing started, there seemed to be some, element of discrimination and judgment, and now, you talk about Robert the Bruce, and I'm sure he wasn't insane in many ways, but the one that really made me laugh was the defacing of Churchill's statue, saying Churchill was a fascist. And I saw a really amusing tweet. Somebody tweeted out in response that wait till they hear about the other guy. I thought was useful perspective.
In the face of that, when you call the man who killed Adolf Hitler a fascist, words seem to lose all of their meaning. And I guess that's kind of the point of the Supreme Court decision today. Sex no longer has a meaning. Man no longer has a meaning. Woman no longer has a meaning. But Maddie, you still have managed to succeed at helping us make some sense of the nonsense. Congratulations on the promotion at National Review, and I'm sure you'll soon get a promotion to be running this radio show because you seem to come on every time I'm here, and really appreciate it. Let's see if the culture decays anymore and the court goes crazier next time, then I'm sure we'll have to speak with you again. Maddie, thank you for being here. Hey, Michael Knowles here, and the fact is, a life of cigars and scotch does not come cheap. So please be sure to subscribe to the Daily Wire on YouTube, because I depend heavily on your support to continue this wonderful lib-triggering life. Thanks.